So without further ado, we'll bring on today's first guest. That is Mr. Joe Everett from NFL Draft Bible. Joseph, how are you today, man?
Doing great. Starting to figure out the NFL a little bit, and then trade deadline coming up, World Series, college football playoff rankings tomorrow. It's that sports nexus of the world, man.
Yeah, a lot of things going on here, to be sure. Just a 1-4 week for me in the Super Contest, so I'm pretty pissed off about that. 1-point loss on New Orleans, half-point loss on the Jets. That was a gamble on my part. I took a bad number in the Super Contest in hopes of being against the consensus, who could get 4.5 as opposed to the market 6. Of course, it falls in between at 5, so wind up losing the Jets. Would have won a personal play in the Jets if I had made one, so I guess that's the way it goes here sometimes in the NFL. But one more game to go for Week 8. That's the Monday Night Football game between the Denver Broncos and the Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs a 7-point favorite here in this one. We really haven't seen a whole lot of movement on this game throughout the week. We've just seen the juice kind of move around a little bit. Total has dropped a couple points from 44.5 to 42.5 at Bookmaker. Joe, what's the biggest key to tonight's game for you?
Well, it's basically the Broncos are going as far as this defense takes them. I think that's what a lot of people would agree with, and it's basically unfortunate for Denver. Their strengths are those corners, and then their strengths on offense are the wide receivers, but that kind of plays right into where the Chiefs want to go. If I had to bet, your player props or something, Travis Kelce should have a big day. I mean, poor coverage backers like Brandon Marshall and Todd Davis. Todd Davis didn't even practice this week, so even if he plays, you're looking at a limited 2 inside backers. And the Chiefs, all those pre-snap motions with Tyreek Hill, all the distractions that he can create, all the while, Kelce, I think, will really have a big Kareem Hunt's going to be using that passing game. They'll get creative with him because safety is still a problem for Denver. I think I've said it on the show before. I'll say it again. T.J. Ward, right before the season, making that move. It stinks in the locker room. It just smells of bad business. And I like Justin Simmons. He's got potential out there, but just all this athleticism aside, he doesn't have that same experience. Darian Stewart is another guy. There's a lot of guys that could be had at safety for Denver, and I would assume Brad showed us he goes Kelce, Demarcus Robinson. You're going to see a little bit of Albert Wilson, but yeah, I'd say attack the seams, pick on Simmons, run Hunt, use Hill on those end arounds. So the Chiefs, theoretically, if they stay ahead of the chains here and keep those sticks going, things should be well. And really, Von Miller, that's your biggest key, is he needs to show up. He had a bad game last week out, and that's the guy. It's like, get off the milk carton, back on the field. Denver's back is definitely up against the wall, but, I mean, big divisional game on their side of the ball. It's just limiting what Trevor Siemian is asked to do, I think, is kind of a key, which is unfortunate because, once again, their strength on O is those 2 great wide receivers, and that's another key. Like, whether or not Emmanuel Sanders is playing, I can't imagine he's at 100% if he plays at all, and that's that. You take away those explosive 9 routes, him killing the seams, him just beating people at will on those quick outs and ends. That take away that from a Mike McCoy offense. You're basically you're leaving that premium matchup of Demaryius Thomas and Marcus Peters there. That's I think Marcus Peters wins more often than not. Demaryius Thomas is good, but he doesn't win with speed. And yeah, Peters is just going to be on him like white on rice. So the Denver will definitely try and establish that running game. C.J. Anderson's a big part of it. The saving grace they have here is I don't think Justin Houston's what he used to be. And Denver does have their tackles back. So I would look – I think that makes sense why this total dropped. I'd look for a little bit of a defensive battle, and if Denver wants to win, I think that's their style. They slow this game down. They kill the clock. They run more, and that's the way they survive. But that's a tough sell against this offense. And Andy Reid, the extra rest they've had, the preparation, they've had this game circled on the calendar. It's that you have to win in your division to make it to the postseason. So I got to think the Chiefs are going to have some success moving the ball. And, yeah, I just expect a bunch of that big old Kelce, who's just really established himself as one of the best tight ends in the league.
What's really difficult for me here, coming out of what was already a frustrating NFL weekend, is that one of the plays that I cut from my card late was Denver. And I want to find reasons to go against this Kansas City team. 6.5 yards per play on offense is absolutely fantastic, but this defense has given up 6.1 yards per play. So they have had some problems back there stopping the run. They've had issues with 4.7 yards per carry. The corners and the safeties outside of Peters with Eric Berry hurt. They've had some problems in coverage here from time to time. Of course, Kansas City's only turned the football over one time. It was a fumble. They've fumbled 9 times. They've only lost one of them. No interceptions from Alex Smith. That's probably not going to continue. I know that they're going to be on the lower end of the spectrum when it comes to turnovers, but still, you'd figure they'd turn the ball over more than once in 7 games, of course, with their 8th game coming up tonight. The problem being, Denver has only forced 4 turnovers here so far this year, so their base defense has played really well. They've held the opposition to 4.5 yards per play, but they're not forcing turnovers. They're not getting those big plays that we would expect from this Denver defense. What happens is they put a pretty bad offense into some compromising positions. So while I think the number is probably a little bit high, especially with the dropping total and with how good this Denver defense is, still, I mean, you look at this situation, Kansas City doesn't turn the football over. So how do the Broncos score? How does Trevor Siemian get short fields? How do they move the football? How do they take advantage of a Chiefs defense that really isn't all that good? So I think for me, I won't have any involvement in this game here tonight, but I think there are some key things you can look at for the future here. Specifically, when will this Kansas City defense actually hurt this team? Was it last week against Oakland? Was it the week before against Pittsburgh? Or are there more spots coming to fade the Chiefs? That's ultimately what my end game is here with tonight's action.
Yeah, what can we take away? And I think you're right that last week's game, Terrence Mitchell, Gaines, Eric Murray, all those other corners opposite Marcus Peters were the ones getting exploited by Carr and the gang. So I think that's where they go. Basically, the game plan against the Chiefs has to be run away from Chris Jones, that gigantic defensive end. Like, he is just wrecking plays. But outside of that, you could run with no Eric Berry. You've got Sorensen, Frank Zombo, Ron Parker, Derek Johnson. He is just aging right before our eyes. So I would expect, they want to pound C.J. Anderson in this game. That's got to be the strategy. And as I mentioned before, they're killing clock. They are going to sap every bit off that play clock before they really get things going. And that's, I think you also really, a great point is, and I touched on it a little bit before, Von Miller, where is he at? I mean, he really needs to show up big in this game, and so does Shane Ray. If the team really misses the departure of a veteran, I don't know if it's just leadership, coaching, or knowing the scheme. DeMarcus Ware and that presence he was creating opposite Miller, they really need someone to run tandem with Miller, and especially when Miller's going to only play a limited amount of snaps, well, you're already forced to maximize his reps and usage. Well, you definitely need somebody else to step up. So, yeah, I'm looking for what Shane Ray could do, and yeah, like you mentioned, just how the Broncos and Mike McCoy, how they're just going to go at this defense, because it's a defense that can be beat. It's not an impossible task here for the Broncos to get within that number.
And another thing, too, I mean, you have to do this in the NFL. You have to try and circle spots, start looking ahead, look for these opportunities where there are games that you want to play. I want to fade the Philadelphia Eagles. I did it in the Super Contest with the 49ers. And look, San Francisco's offense was atrocious in this game. They only had 3.7 yards per play, but they were only outgained 304 to 238, lost this game by 23, despite holding the Eagles to 4.6 yards per play. Next week, Denver plays the Eagles. It's on the road, back-to-back travel, short week off Monday night. So a lot of situational angles going against Denver here, and that's, again, frustrating to me with the early kickoff as well. It's frustrating to me because I want to fade the Eagles. They're only plus 0.3 yards per play so far this year. Obviously, we know what Doug Peterson there in Philadelphia comes from the Andy Reid coaching tree. A lot of similarities in formations and motion and things of that sort between the Chiefs and the Eagles. So Denver will already be prepared for that type of scheme. But again, things just not particularly lining up here with the schedule. So unless Denver really gets blown out and next week's number opens way too high, it's just another one of those spots where, things set up the way I want them to statistically. Things just don't set up the way I want them to situationally. So, we'll see what Denver looks like here coming out of this game. Obviously, if they get blown out, maybe you look for a bounce back. If they win, you may look for that potential letdown. So, but the Broncos are in a very precarious position here because if they lose tonight, they drop to 3-4. If they lose next week against the Eagles, which is a very bad spot, they drop to 3-5. Then the Patriots come to town for Sunday Night Football, and New England seems to have kind of gotten things back on track a little bit here. Obviously, they don't turn the football over, so that'll make things rough on Trevor Siemian. Bengals, then the Raiders on the road. All of a sudden, you start looking at a Denver team that may not have a great shot to win a game until December 3rd, all the way out on the road against Miami.
Yeah, I mean, because Cincinnati may get their act together. Obviously, Oakland's no joke, another divisional battle. And, yeah, you mentioned those three, including Kansas City tonight. It just doesn't get any easier, and the schedule makers definitely didn't do them any favors.
Well, and I mean, what do you think about what can Denver do here? I mean, we'll sort of look ahead to the offseason here a little bit, and then we'll get back to Week 8. But, I mean, Denver just hired Vance Joseph. You would think that they give him a fairly long leash here. I mean, what do they do? Do they try to take one of those quarterbacks in the middle of the first round? If things go the way that they're going, this is a team that's going to pick probably in the middle of the first round. Do they go quarterback, try to find that guy? Do they, look around in the free agent market? What do you think that Denver does going forward here? Because we may actually be looking at the end of an era with how good this team has been over the last few years.
Yeah, it'll be tough to keep this defense together. I mean, there's already so much money in corner. You've sunk a ton of money in Von Miller, and it would be refreshing if they spent a first-round pick on a quarterback and just immediately fessed up our mistakes on Paxton Lynch, Brock Osweiler, the heist. It's just, they've been fortunate on the Osweiler front at least, but they basically, if they could just kind of wipe the slate clean, hit reset, and the Wyoming kid would make a whole lot of sense for their offense that they still want to run. You need someone athletic, and even if you don't like him, I do believe this is a good enough quarterback class where you can kind of pick your flavor of ice cream and what really fits your scheme. But yeah, I would love it as a Broncos fan if they just kind of, like I said, hit the reset button, bring a new quarterback in here, keep Siemian. At least you've got the place setter, the footboard holder eventually, but you could start if worse comes to worse or an injury. But yeah, I think that's got to be the direction. I mean, especially in an offensive draft. I mean, if you don't do that, take the Penn State kid because we're pretty long in the tooth at running back. But I think it does have to be addressed. And really, you've just got a lot of guys that it's not like we haven't seen them in reps. The only one we haven't seen in Denver is Chad Kelly. And that's just a year or 3 or 5 away from happening. So I do believe it's got to be quarterback. They've addressed the O-line. I think Garrett Bowles is a future stud. I love Kyle Whittingham's program, what he does with linemen. So you've addressed the line with Leary in the offseason last year. It's time to, I think, get that quarterback, replace what you got.
All right, well, we touched on the Oakland Raiders, an upcoming opponent here for the Denver Broncos, and they went out on the road against the Buffalo Bills. They were a little bit of a sharp side here in this game. This number came down off of 3 into the 1.5 range at some shops. It was 2.5 at others. But if you look at this game, Buffalo with a 34-14 win, you would think to yourself, okay, well, Buffalo must have severely outplayed the Raiders. Not the case at all. Oakland had 5.8 yards per play in this game, but 4 turnovers. Buffalo didn't turn the football over. They've only turned the football over 3 times so far this season, and that was the name of the game. So the Bills cruised to a 20-point win, even though they gave up 367 yards here. A lot of them through the air to Derek Carr, and, of course, some of those, while the game was mostly in hand. So what you're looking at here is a Buffalo team now sitting at 5-2. They're 4-0 at home. They're playing very well up there in Western New York. You think that the culture change in Buffalo has a lot to do with this?
I can't stress enough how impressive it's been. I think that's what we tend to lean on this show. Or if I can take away anything from a game, I love to lean on the coaching. I mean, it emphasizes the leadership. It emphasizes everyone's attitude, what's really bringing everyone together. And not only have they completely changed schemes on defense, but now they've traded away their four of their top draft picks from the last 6 or 7 years. Totally new. Even LaShawn McCoy after the game, I think it was something about it's not about talent, it's not about athleticism or experience, it's about everyone playing with a big heart, with belief. And that, to me, that quote was a shot across the bow to players like Marcel Darius, Sammy Watkins, Stephon Gilmore, and Ronald Darby. I mean, all these guys were dealt. Now, they got some stuff back, acquisitions, trades, draft picks, but I really see them getting rid of, like, all the me guys. They kept the we guys, and now they're playing this new scheme, and it's working. I think, sure, a lot of people might look at some of this game with the Raiders, hey, it's a bad spot, turnovers, that the Raiders still moved the ball. Yeah, they did, but this team is all in on defense. They forced those turnovers, I think, legit with solid effort. Leonard Johnson just pelted DeAndre Washington for that first fumble. And then Jalen Richard, I think he got stripped fair and square as well. It's just that's what they're teaching. It's the style of play, and you can't tell me that's not coaching. Some of these defenses are just better at starting that lawnmower up and ripping that ball out when a runner's stalled. You see it. You saw it so many years in Chicago Bears with Lovie Smith's defense, and that wasn't by accident. That is by coaching. That is by tendency, good habits developed, and yeah, this whole culture change is real. This defense playing out of their minds. I'm not nuts about their offense at all. I think there's, praise to the coaching staff there. They grabbed as an organization, they grabbed a hold of this steering wheel, turned it around, readjusted this whole franchise. The complete change on defense, the jettison of a ton of salary in those trades, and I don't want to get too far in the future, but I want to put it back on the table. The Bills have 2 first-rounders, 2 second-rounders, 2 third-rounders, 4th, 5th, and the 6th and 7th. So they're loaded up for the draft. They've altered their course as a team. Like, their destiny is now different, and they're not just playing for tomorrow. Today is a real outcome. So, yeah, I can't say enough. It's just a whole makeover, and really it's been kind of instant coffee. I won't say it's happened overnight, but it's only turning week 9 now, and the Bills are, like, right in control where they need to be and just playing good football.
Well, and I think what's going to be really interesting here is to see what Bills lines look like going forward, because you run into a situation here with this Bills team in that, you're looking at a lot of signs of regression for them. And I'm curious to see what the market does in terms of those games. I mean, look, they're plus 14 in turnover margin right now. They're minus half a yard per play. So both of those things right there are things that a lot of people are going to look at and say, okay, this probably can't continue. I mean, they're number 1 in percentage of opponents' drives ending with a turnover at 20.3%, and they have the second best turnover percentage at 3.8%. So they're winning the field position battle. They're making it easier on Tyrod Taylor. The running game has not been all that spectacular, just 3.8 yards per carry for LaShawn McCoy this year on 137 attempts, but they're taking care of the football. They're not hurting themselves. And that was one of the things that I've kind of been trying to look at a little bit more here in the NFL, is that the teams that don't hurt themselves are the teams that are just having significant amounts of success here this year. Kansas City, 1 turnover. Buffalo, 3 turnovers. Patriots, 5 turnovers. The Saints, only 7 turnovers. Now, you've got the Giants and the Seahawks in there who have both had problems. They each have 7 turnovers. But overall, the teams that don't hurt themselves with bad penalties, the teams that don't hurt themselves with turning the football over, those are the teams that are having success. And maybe the formula is just a little bit more simple, or a little bit simpler, I should say, than a lot of us think.
Well, and I will have to agree, though, they have a chance of being overvalued going forward. People are picking up on this, but that's where they're going to get caught, I fear, too, is just on offense. They've got that mantra, we're just going to pound this run, and what a great leader. I mean, not just is LaShawn McCoy the focal point of the offense, he's also pretty much the spokesman of the team. You want to gauge the temperature of the Bills, you better talk to Shady. But that's what they're doing. Like you said, they're taking care of the ball. They're just not letting themselves beat them, and what they're doing with not a lot of talent on the outside. I like Jordan Matthews, and he's going to develop for them, but you're basically sticking him in a brand-new offense. And Zay Jones, there's potential there, obviously, but we're talking about a very green around the gills rookie here, and they're still able to stay in games. Hopefully Charles Clay gets back for him, because that really was in theory, outside of McCoy, that's their leading receiver in this scheme. So, just getting by on offense, that's the areas I'd look for when they really are up against an actual respectable defense. Maybe you're looking at those unders or something, but this is a team. It's just hard not to get on their side with a coach they're buying in and a bunch of players that they're drinking the Kool-Aid.
Well, and they've got a short week here. They go up to the Meadowlands, take on the New York Jets. I guess I should say across the Meadowlands, and take on the New York Jets here on Thursday night. So you got an AFC East battle here. Bills are a 3-point favorite, -15, -20 out there, depending on the sports book that you're looking at. And, all of a sudden, this becomes a really interesting game. You've got this Jets team that, realistically speaking, probably should have covered against the Falcons here over the weekend. They're 3-5, which 3 wins is more than a lot of people figured that they would get this year. But the Bills have a chance to improve to 6-2 and then kind of sit around with a little bit of extra rest before taking on the Saints at home. So, this is a really good game here on Thursday night, a good barometer for both of these teams. How do you think this one stacks up?
I'd really be wanting to take that Bills in the 3. I'd lay the field goal in that one. And what was the last game? 21-12. Granted, different Jets team, different part of the process, but I think they buckle down on McCown. There's not much else the Jets could do against those corners. Tre'Davious White just playing some great football, and I'd look at the Bills getting away with that one. And as you mentioned, they're just heading into some extra time off. Great time to play the Jets, get an extra couple of days, and then really bone up for that Saints game, that's sure to be a classic.
All right, well, we'll look back here at the performance of Deshaun Watson and the Houston Texans. They lose 41-38, did cover the number against the Seahawks. I played the Seahawks in the Super Contest. I liked it a lot more until we got a lot of people on it with what happened with Texans owner Bob McNair, and the comments that he made that the players obviously did not appreciate. And there was a little bit of uncertainty about how Houston would respond here coming into this game, but they wound up giving a good effort out there in Seattle. The defense didn't really do a whole lot, but the offense certainly did, as Deshaun Watson threw for 402 yards and 4 touchdowns in this game on just 19 completions. He was, however, sacked 5 times, 3 interceptions. So you had a lot of good, you had a little bit of bad here. What were your overall impressions of Watson's performance?
I've been a believer, like as far as the draft process, but I think the last time we talked about it on the show, I was just advising people, hey, this was Tennessee, this is one game, things happen in a vacuum, let's pump the brakes. Well, I'm taking those brakes off. I think his restrictor plate's off. I mean, this guy's full throttle right now. The rookie curve, I don't know where that is. I think he's beyond scheming for him. You can't just put a spy on him. He's going to break pain. He's going to keep his eyes downfield. You can't even distract him with an idiot owner. I just cannot say enough. Like, just in that situation on the road against what is reputable. Now, granted, this is not the same old Legion of Boom, but that situation, as you mentioned, the distractions, I think he's just stepped up. Like I said, he just finds the pressure where it's coming. He can sense it even if he can't see it. And when he evades that pass rush and gets outside the pocket, that's just such a challenge for any middle line. I don't care what position you play. Running with this kid is tough. And, so what if he doesn't have velocity? No, he doesn't have a howitzer, and that was the big knock on him. He's coming from a gimmicky college offense. He just keeps stepping back up. And the kid now, if you think about it, Nick Saban's pressure cooker odd front, Dick LeBeau's zone blitz, Pete Carroll's classic Trojan 4-3 that's being copied throughout the league, and now Bill Belichick's scheming 3-4. He's seen all those defenses and scored plenty of points and made big plays against every single one of those crews. That's a murderer's row that would put a lot of rookies to shame. Now, he's surrounded with talent, and I think that's why he's able to get away with this. And I really can't stand, if we redrafted, of course, it's got to be the Browns, and he'd turn the Browns around, he'd turn the Bears around, he'd turn the 49ers. He would not be the same quarterback with the Browns. I'm sorry. The Bears have no wide receivers. If the same injuries happen with the Bears, you stick Deshaun Watson on to Chicago, yes, they'd have a little more success, but he's not doing this without Will Fuller. He's not doing this without Nuck Hopkins. And really, we talk about Denver backs up against the wall here. That coaching staff in Houston, this was it. If it didn't work out with Watson, game over, and there's a big reset button for the whole crew, including maybe GM Rick Smith. So they had to make this work, and, yeah, credit to their coaching staff. They not only got this kid up to speed, they took some humble pie, they changed up their offense, they made it a little more Clemson-esque, and it's just showing. And I'm going to break my arm, patting myself on the back, Adam, because in the draft process for Draft Bible, I was one of the only guys kind of banging the table for Watson. Ended up losing that debate, but you can rest assured I'm rubbing it in on conference calls now. And that the one takeaway, just to get back to the point, this secondary is still bad in Houston. They're going to continue to have problems without Watt and Merciless. They're just putting that pressure on. Without that, they're going to be exploited. They're going to give up those big plays. And, you know, not to be ignored, Russell Wilson on the other side of this game, he put up plenty of points and moved the ball with ease. And it was Lockett. If it wasn't Lockett, it was Paul Richardson getting open in this secondary. And what's unfortunate is Houston, they've put assets and draft picks and things into this secondary, and it's there's still some suspect players. So I think they're just going to be forced into boat races, whoever they're playing. I mean, just both sides of the ball. You're going to continue, I think, to see just high scores for these Texans games because Watson's just going to keep on keeping on, man.
All right, well, let's go to the NFC East here. Let's talk a little bit of Dallas Cowboys. They go on the road, beat the Washington Redskins 33-19, a week after blowing out the 49ers, and that, of course, came the week after the bye. So seems like things maybe have settled down a little bit in Dallas here after kind of an inauspicious start to the season. Of course, we still don't know when or if Ezekiel Elliott will have to serve this suspension that continues to get pushed back. Big workhorse game for him, 33 carries, $150, couple scores, 4.5 yards per carry, 4.3 yards per carry overall for Dallas. And it's a good sign for the Cowboys that they were able to win a game relatively comfortably here and not have to get a whole lot out of Dak Prescott. It was just 14 of 22 for 143 yards. But you're not crazy about the Dallas Cowboys right now.
Well, I'm just seeing a team that's going to have to outscore everybody in every single game. And, yeah, that's all. They've got their offense back together. That Zeke looks great. Still holes on that offense, too. Lyle Collins is not Doug Free, as we've said, and he had a number of bad reps in that last game. They won in spite of him. Just could not block Ryan Kerrigan. He should be thankful Ryan Kerrigan had that groin injury where he had to leave the game at parts, and I think that's what really hampered him. And then their guard situation is atrocious. Draft bust Jonathan Cooper running with the ones. That just shouldn't be. I mean, Bruce Arians, the Cardinals, gladly got rid of him in that trade, and then Bill Belichick kicks him to the curb after the deal. He resurfaces in Dallas. You're looking at three really good coaching staffs, in particular the Patriots. Dante Scarnecchia, legendary offensive line coach. If he has that kid in camp and says it ain't there, it ain't there. So I don't know what the Cowboys are thinking with Jonathan Cooper. I think they get exposed against Philly's got to be licking their chops, and on defense, they've got a lot of guys that can't run in that secondary. What they're getting by with right now is a great defensive line. Getting Dave Irving back, DeMarcus Lawrence is just playing at an elite level. It's clear. I mean, he definitely wants a big contract, but there's just a corner problem. And it's not going to get better because of injury unless Chidobe Awuzie is some Janoris Jenkins, and I don't know if we saw that at Colorado. I think this is a flawed team. It's a suspect head coach, beatable secondary, and yes, they're winning with a stud back. They got a mobile, heady quarterback, and that defensive line turns the screws with a lead in their back pocket. I mean, that's all great and well and good, but what happens in the close games, and what happens against elite quarterbacks, and what happens if it's not pouring rain? I think they were getting killed with those Chris Thompson screen passes. They couldn't cover Jordan Reed to save their life. Another fortune for them that Jordan Reed was banged up in this game. I'm waiting until they play Philly. I think Zach Ertz, in ideal conditions, when you're trying to spy Carson Wentz on a broken pocket, good luck. I see flaws with this Cowboy team.
Well, the Cowboys, it doesn't really get easy for them here over the next 3 weeks. Kansas City at home, at Atlanta, and, of course, we'll see if the Falcons can have anything turned around by that point. And then that Eagles matchup on Sunday Night Football on November 19th. So that'll be a pretty big one there. And then, of course, the short week to take on the Chargers on Thanksgiving. And, at least that one's at home, and they do play 3 straight home games here to close out November. But still, you'll have to see what happens with the Cowboys as we go forward. Another team that you wanted to make mention of here on today's show, and I think this is a really good one to end on, is the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And this is a team where we saw a pretty decent amount of sharp involvement come in on Carolina. Eventually, this number did settle in the 1.5 range, but people liked the Panthers in this spot. Maybe it was a fade of Jameis Winston off the injury. Maybe it was the expectation that Cam Newton would be better. Spoiler alert, he was not. But Tampa Bay only scored 3 points here in this game. So, what are you doing with the Bucs right now? Are you buying? Are you selling? Are you kind of waiting it out? What do you think?
I'm scooping up some stock right now. I looked at this score and the results and I didn't get the chance to watch the game, so Sunday night late I just popped it in the condensed version. Didn't get the all 22 fancy yet, but I'm looking at just a bad set of circumstances here, and I think the big reason for that Panthers backing those 2 corners out for the Buccaneers, that was really good, and it did make a difference. But I think everyone's swimming downstream. I'm going to go upstream. 4 losses in a row. Dirk Cotter's hot seat. Yes, Jameis Winston in his shoulder. They didn't score any points. I'm telling you, it's a windy day. Tampa's 2 starting corners also, they hurt themselves so many times with penalties. And what really, I think, part of this re-injury, it's not that it's limiting his passing, it's just that practice time that was not limited all week. I think the only full practice he put in was Friday because it's all he could take. It's all they wanted to chance. And it really affected the chemistry with the receivers. His cadence for the whole first half wasn't right, and his delivery, I don't think, got fine-tuned until the end of the third quarter. But even with that, the Bucs were in position late for, I think, 11, 10 minutes left, whatever it was. Jameis just gets hit from behind by Captain Munnerlyn. It's the tipped pass, gets intercepted. Cam Newton goes on a big drive. They're up another touchdown, and it's just the one that really stinks was the Luke Kuechly interception. He stared him down and just gave that one away. So that is a bad mistake, but I think there's just a lot of injury factors, the chemistry, the cohesion, and then on the other side, Luke Kuechly returning to the lineup he's a difference maker. It's clear cut. He's not just a coach on the field. This is his defense that they're running. I mean, it's basically the whole show. It's up to him, and him being back, that's a completely different defense. So I look for Winston, what I'm going to be paying when he's back in full practice. They get those cornerbacks back in the lineup. I think you also have those winds that were gusting in that game that may have just he overshot a lot of passes. I don't think it's, like I said, it's not arm strength. It's just ball placement. One was definitely a wrong route, but I'm convinced Jameis, he regresses back in a positive way, and I think this team, you can kind of buy low on their lowest right now. People see, 20-3, that, this team's in the dirt. This coach could get fired. I don't want any part of this. I love going on teams, backs up against the wall. I think that's probably my theme for today, but that's definitely a Tampa Bay team that there's still a ton of talent on this roster, not just offensively, defensively. They'll get their act together to sink or swim at this point, and I believe they'll swim.
Well, injuries have played a big part. I mean, Quan Alexander and Levante David were both out earlier on in the year, and those are 2 significant losses for Tampa Bay. I mean, that's pretty much their entire linebacker corps at that point. And, those 2 guys are both very, very good. Quan Alexander is one of the most underrated linebackers in the NFL. But let me ask you this, Joe. The next game for Jameis Winston, which will come against Saints here on Sunday, assuming he's able to go with the Saints a 7-point favorite, this will be game number 40 for Jameis Winston. Right around a 60% completion percentage, 60 touchdowns, about 39 interceptions here. So, kind of that 3-2 ratio a little bit with him. What is Jameis Winston at this point? I mean, he's only 23 years old. There's probably still some more development to be done, maybe with a different head coach, a different offensive coordinator. We could see things take off. We could see him take care of the football a little bit more. But I mean, is 2.5 seasons enough to give a concrete report on this guy? I mean, what do you think about him as we go forward here throughout his career?
I think, you've had some situations of injury, but there's not many excuses here. The turnovers have been abundant. He's willing to take chances, and this whole team has kind of acquiesced, I guess you could say, to him. Dirk Cotter's the head coach because Jameis wanted it so. Deshaun Jackson is over in the crew because Jameis wanted it to be. I know Mike Evans and Deshaun have a little bit of a relationship, but he's asking for targets. He's asking for this coach. Well, ask. They want some returns. And, yeah, I think at the end of this season, it's a fair question to ask, where are we at quarterback? Is this the way we want to go forward? But that organization believes, I still believe, I still think leadership-wise, he is there. There's no question he's all bought in on it, and there are players that still gravitate towards this guy. So I think from that perspective, you're going forward, and my chips would be all in if I was that GM. And you just continue to try and fix that offensive line, I think is where I go for. But still, I have faith in Winston, and it's been a rough year. There's no doubt in the expectations, I think, which is that's the most difficult part about this. You add Deshaun Jackson, you draft O.J. Howard. You were already serviceable last year. It should only be better, and it has been anything but better. But I still do think, brighter days from this offense and team yet ahead.
What about Jason Licht? I mean, is he safe here? This is his 4th year, and 2-14, 6-10, 9-7. Sort of, his job security is pretty much tied to how Jameis Winston develops here with this football team. He made the decision, like you said, to go with Cotter because that's what Winston wanted. And, that's one of those things that kind of defines your tenure as a GM, is that franchise quarterback and the head coach that you give him, and to some extent the offensive coordinator as well. So, is he safe? Do we see a reshuffling of the deck here in Tampa Bay? Look, this is a team that, has a banged-up quarterback, still has a really challenging schedule left ahead. They're only 2-5. Doesn't look like the playoffs are going to be a thing. Do you think that we kind of see some – they don't have a bye week either, so that doesn't really help them this season. Do we see a reshuffling of the deck here with, the ace of spades and Jameis Winston still at the top?
Oh, yeah, well, if it all goes wrong this year, the only one safe is Jameis. That is a fact, and really – Licht he's got some questionable decisions in the past. Namely, Roberto Aguayo is probably going to haunt him for life, but I don't know that he's made terrible picks. Vernon Hargraves is still an up-and-comer. Noah Spence is on IR right now, but I think they took a chance in a guy that could pass rush. So there's something there. I don't hate his last draft class, but I think it's no fault of his own. It's such a results business, and if they fire that coach, they'll fire the GM. They'll go whole clean slate, and I hate to say reset button again, but that's basically what this would be. They keep Evans, they keep Jameis, one of those linebackers. I think eventually Levante David might have to walk, but you rebuild that team around Jameis, Mike Evans, and Quan Alexander, and I don't think Jason Licht is safe. And if anything, you want a scapegoat, he sure looks like an easy one to me.
Joe Everett from NFL Draft Bible. What's going on over there right now, Joe?
Breaking out a conference call right after I get off the line here, wide receivers for the College Gridiron Showcase. We're getting hot and heavy on those invites. And, we've got a podcast, I'd say, coming up. I want to say it would likely be Friday, breaking down some of the bigger games of college football this week. So, that and daily scouting reports. We've got them piped up and loaded up until 2018 for the scouting reports. So you can see a new prospect every day at NFLDraftBible.com.
And you can follow Joe on Twitter at Joe W. Everett and at NFL Draft Bible. Joe, thank you so much for your time, man. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you again next week, bud.
All right. Looking forward to it, Adam.